I want to thank Tick Segerblom for joining me, and I'm filibustering for a moment so I can get his microphone on. Tick, thank you so much for joining me. How are you this evening?
Great, thank you.
Awesome. I want you to take a minute to introduce yourself a little bit to the candidate. To the audience, rather, as the candidate. Introduce yourself and tell them a little about yourself, and then we'll just have a conversation about what you stand for and what you represent.
Okay. I'm a state senator. I'm running for my second term. Before that, I was in the state assembly for 3 terms. And my claim to fame is I'm the 4th generation in my family to be in the Nevada legislature. My great-grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, and I have all been in the Nevada legislature.
Wow. So 4th generation, and you have been involved in politics. How long have you been actively engaged in politics in Nevada?
I like to say I've had 3 political careers. I worked for President Carter when he actually wasn't in Nevada, but worked for President Carter when he was running for election back in the 70s. Worked at the White House, and then when he lost, I kind of retired. I was head of the Democratic Party in Nevada, state chairman for 4 years in the early 90s when Bill Clinton was elected, and then retired. And then I came back on my own right in 2006, I guess it was, when I ran for the state legislature.
Okay, so you've had a long career, and you are a 4th generation politician there. So let me just jump to something that jumps out to me. This campaign season seems to be more about anti-establishment, at least on the national level, right? Politics on the local level can be totally different. As a 4th generation politician, or someone active, let's give it that name. And considering your positions that you've held, particularly as the state Democratic chair, how would you cast your candidacy as a progressive? How are you not the establishment?
Well, like they say about Bernie, he's been in the Congress for 20 years, but he's still not the establishment. And I think it really goes more to what your philosophy is, and if you look at your career, have you changed over time? Do you bend with the wind? Do you pick up whatever is most expedient at the time you're running, or are you consistent with your philosophy and you'll be able to hold that throughout your career? And I like to personally think I have done that, and obviously Senator Sanders has done the same thing, where he's been saying the same thing since the 60s.
So consistency for you. Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. I agree with you. Consistency on a message of progressivism, I think is key. I agree with that 100%. How would you categorize the Democratic establishment that a lot of us young millennials fight against? How would you categorize that as being different than the establishment that you were a part of? Even though you may still hold true to these progressive values, how would we delineate between those two?
Well, I think everybody in their political career, you try to be as pure as you can until there comes a point in your life when basically you sell your soul for power. And I think the Democratic establishment is basically sold out to Goldman Sachs, sold out to the pharmaceutical industries. I mean, at all levels, we basically just bought into them or let them buy into us. And that's really due to Citizens United and the way campaign finance works. So if you want to get elected, you need to raise that money. And where's the money? It's with the corporations.
It's funny you should say that, because just as you were saying that, one of our moderators in the chat room said that not being owned. That's the definition of anti-establishment, is someone who is not owned by special interests. And it sounds like, even though you've been active in politics in Nevada for a very long time, and your family has been there for a very long time, you are not owned by any special interest. Would that be a fair assessment?
I would hope that's true. But again, given the way politics works and the fact you have to raise money to be in politics, there are always going to be certain people that if they call you up, you're going to return their phone calls. If they ask you to come meet with them, you're going to meet with them. If you have a fundraiser, you're going to call them up and ask them to come to your fundraiser. So I can't say I'm as pure as Senator Sanders. I would like to have 3 million donors that I could reach out to $27 a person, but that's not reality at my level.
Okay. Hey, I can. You know what? That is transparency is very, very helpful. Let me dig in something else. One thing I found that was very interesting is that you really came out in support for Bernie Sanders long before anyone thought he had a chance. I found way back, actually, let me be true. My producer found way back in June of 2015 that you actually endorsed or supported Bernie Sanders. And this is before anyone gave him a snowball's chance in hell. Help me to understand why you believed in him so early on and came out for him so early.
Yeah, and actually, if you look back, I reached out to him in the fall of 2014. And when he came to a convention here in Las Vegas in November 2014, I held an event for him. So I've been doing presidential politics, I said, since President Carter. And I understand how it works. And basically, there's different people out there, but you always need two people. And knowing the Clintons and knowing how moderate they are, I guess is the best way to describe them, I knew that, or at least I hoped there would be a progressive alternative to them. I was looking around. Elizabeth Warren was making noise, but it looked like she wasn't going to do it. I could see Bernie was actually looking out there and seeing if she's not going to run, then there's a vacuum, a void, and he was looking at running. So I reached out to him, stayed in touch with him, and I was happy to join in with him because the reality is, Clinton had everybody and their uncle already lined up in Nevada and all around the country. So if I jumped on that ship, it wasn't going to make any difference. And I think that if we don't start to the left in the Democratic Party, you end up so far to the right that there's no point. There's really no dime's worth of difference between the parties, and that's the problem with the Clintons. They are middle of the road to start with, then they start negotiating, and before you know it, you've negotiated away everything.
You just said something that I say on my show all the time, is that coming from the left, we actually have to come from the left. And we can't start our negotiations dead smack in the center, or else we will keep getting pushed further and further to the right, which has been the case, in my opinion. We've been doing that at least since 1981. We've been pushing further and further to the right. And so I absolutely love that assessment. So that takes me to some general questions. I know you have some specific things that are happening in your district and in your state. And before we get into those specific things, tell us, what is a progressive to you? Because there seems to be this outstanding question of whether there is even such a thing as a progressive. Is Hillary Clinton a progressive, or are we just socialists? There's a lot in the mainstream media that is trying to obfuscate the definition of progressivism. So what is progressive to you?
I think at its core, it's that government has a role, and that we should be proud of government. And as Bernie says, basically look to Sweden, look to Denmark, look to Norway as a model where we don't eat up people as part of some capitalist system, but we think that the goal of government is to make sure that people are protected, people are promoted, and then to the extent that we can have a progressive economy too, then that's fine. But you don't leave people behind. You don't leave people in the streets. You don't leave them without health insurance or family leave or any things that we don't have that other countries have. And that's what's so encouraging about Senator Sanders, the fact that, number one, he's willing to say the word socialism, even though he doesn't mean the socialism most people think about. But the reality is government has a role, and we as Americans have never really bought into that basically since the 30s. And we need to get back to that point. I became of age in the 60s. And back then, we all thought that socialism was around the corner. We were all set to do all these things. And then Bobby Kennedy was killed, and the rest of everything kind of fell to the wayside. But even when I worked for President Carter, he was all set to do national health insurance. Right. But then with Reagan, we just took a step back, and we went the opposite direction for so long. But now we're back to the point. And the other thing about it is President Obama, which in my opinion is the best president in history, has gotten us to the point where we now can talk about socialism. We've gotten the basics with having Obamacare there. We have the basics. So now it's where do we try to go from here? And that's why we should shoot for the moon. To try to do it incrementally at this point, to me, is ridiculous. Let's just lay it all out there. Obama's got us to this point. Now let's go to the next step, which is basically national health care. Get rid of Wall Street, get all these things that Bernie's talking about. That's the next logical step.
Okay, so let's talk about Nevada specifically. What's going on in your particular?
I'm sorry, that's a phone.
Not a problem.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, great. It stopped. So tell me about Nevada. What are some of the looming issues that are really important to your constituency?
Well, we have minimum wage we're trying to increase. We have criminal justice reform. We have just a terrible tax structure that ideally we can change. Our school system is totally overwhelmed. So we are just in the very backwaters as far as progressiveness. If you look at most lists, we're number 50 or 49 worst as far as progressive issues. But we are so close to California. We have so much of California's similarities. It's just we're on the verge of totally flipping the state. We just have to hang in there tough. That's where the presidential campaign really helps us, because it brings energy, it brings enthusiasm, it registers voters that hopefully we can use to make the whole state progressive.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the main reasons, because if there's going to be a nationwide progressive movement, it has to exist on the state level. It has to exist in the state house, not just in Congress, not just in the Senate, not just in the White House, and not just on the court. It has to exist on the state level. And that's why I think it's really important for us to bring focus and shine a light on progressive Democrats that are supporting Bernie Sanders. And you know what? And I want to make this distinction. It's not just about Bernie Sanders as much as it's what he stands for. And I like the conversation we had a little bit before the show started, because we were discussing how in many ways this is just going back to a more progressive era in American history. This is nothing new. This might be new for millennials, people like me who were born, only world we knew or know is the world that Ronald Reagan created. But for people like you, there was a progressive era that if we get back to the progressive era, we'll actually be making progress. What do you think about that?
Totally. I see your generation, the millennials, as same as my generation. You're optimistic, you're enthusiastic, you're willing to sacrifice, and you're not afraid of anything. You're not afraid of taxes when you realize that that's how you pay for things. So the 60s are basically being repeated right now. And if we can just avoid having the disasters that befell us, Bobby Kennedy being killed and then McGovern disaster, the fact is we are primed to take this country where we were in '68 and move forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used '68 as the year, because that was the year liberalism was assassinated, right? Literally.
I was in college in Los Angeles when Bobby Kennedy was killed. And if he had not been killed, we would have, the last 50 years wouldn't have happened. We were all set to go forward. Yeah. And with his death, unfortunately, things went backwards. And now we're coming back to that point, and we're all relying upon your generation to take it from here.
Now, there's one aspect of the 60s that we absolutely don't want to go back to. And that is where I want to ask you a little bit more about, because I didn't see much on your website in terms of issues for for minorities, for particularly African Americans. And the national conversation is such that it is, it's Black Lives Matter right now. And how does that fit into a progressive world? Can it fit? Is there natural alliances between what Black Lives Matter stands for and what Bernie Sanders stands for? So I want to ask you, as a person who is a progressive, and you want to get back to the Bobby Kennedy style progressivism, which he was progressive even on, and especially in his later years, they were progressive on civil rights. But now today, it's Black Lives Matter, criminal justice reform. Where do you stand with that movement, and what would you do in your state to help Black Lives Matter and criminal justice reform?
Well, let's take it to the flip side, which is criminal justice reform. I mean, I agree with Senator Sanders that that's the key. That and raising the minimum wage, economics, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a job, it doesn't matter how egalitarian you are. But with respect to criminal justice reform, which is my pet peeve right now, we have to go back in and look at all these statutes, all these crimes. In the 90s, we basically took everything and said, well, if it's 10 years for this, let's double it to 20. And we took the drug crimes, which are obviously being used to hold down the minority communities, increase those penalties dramatically. So then it's also being used to take out people's right to vote. So if you can tag somebody with a felony, then you can't let them get their voting rights back. That takes a whole group of people that are probably most likely Democrats, out of the picture. And that's what I believe the Republicans have done successfully. Is they've tagged with African American males, they've given them felonies, and then they've denied them the right to a job, and it's just destroyed a whole society. So we have to go back, take those felonies off, pardon people or whatever it takes to get their records clean, allow them to be able to vote again, and then raise the minimum wage, provide public sector jobs so everybody has a job, and then you have a right to say to somebody, okay, look, you can't just sit around. If you want to work, you have a right to work. There's a place here for you. Back in the 60s, we had CETA programs, which actually the government said, here's a job for you. Humphrey Hawkins, which was a legislation passed back then, said the goal of the government is to make sure everybody has a job. Whatever happened to that? Now it's like throw people out there. McDonald's is going to hire you for $7 an hour. Go for it. That's great. That's ridiculous. As Bernie says, the fact is we are subsidizing Walmart because people that are working for Walmart are getting food stamps. That's insanity.
Okay. Let me. So much to unpack there, and I know we wanted to do about 15 minutes. Do you have about 5 more minutes?
I've got all night.
Okay,
Listen, to be able to talk to people of your generation about what I've seen and encourage you to keep going forward. You can talk to me forever.
Okay, so I think we should have a very useful conversation here on something. And perhaps it's, I have to use you as a proxy for Bernie Sanders, because the next question I'm going to ask you would be something I would ask Bernie Sanders. And if you can't answer it, that's perfectly fine. I understand. Can you see why everything that you just said, even though it's 100% accurate, and I agree with you, can you see how that language may not resonate with African Americans? And the reason I ask that is because there is a concerted effort to push this idea that progressives, particularly Bernie Sanders style progressives, can't connect with African Americans. And as I hear you talk, I can connect with it because I understand the economic importance. But can you see how what you just said may not resonate with some African Americans that we really need to reach on behalf of progressivism?
Yes, and at the end of the day, my background, growing up in a white community, I'll never probably be able to relate that much. Yeah. But the fact is, we're coming from different worlds, but we're trying to address the same issue. And to the extent that I can help that, I'll do that. But at the end of the day, having me represent the Black community, the African American community, that's not realistic. We need to have an African American represent the African American. We need to have a Latino represent the Latino community, and that's part of our job, is to pass the mantle to those people to be the leaders. But to the extent that I'm here right now, I'm going to have to say what I have to say and hopefully promote those ideas.
Tick, I actually really like that answer. I'm going to be honest with you. All jokes aside, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. I really like that answer because you're honest and transparent in the sense that even if you tried, you would not be an effective communicator for African-American issues. You could join a solidarity with us, but it's best represented by someone who understands it naturally. And I don't think that there's any better way to it. For instance, as much as I can identify with women's rights, it's just better to have a woman speak on women's rights because they understand it from a level that we as men just can't do it. So I don't have any qualm with that answer whatsoever, and I actually rather appreciate it. So, since you answered that so well, there's so many other things that I could ask you. But before I do that, I want you to tell my audience how they can support you. If they liked what they've heard, and they're going to decide for themselves if they're going to hit the internet and support you and promote you, what can they do to help you out the most?
Well, the reality is I have a very Democratic district, so I'm pretty much elected. Mm-hmm. So what I need is help in Nevada, both with Bernie, and then we need to make sure that we get the state Senate back. We're one vote short as far as Democratic control. Okay. If we win that one seat and people in Nevada can figure out which seat that is, then I'll be head of the Judiciary Committee. I can promote these criminal justice reform bills. I can promote marijuana, things that we're doing to make Nevada better, more like California, and more like a progressive place it could be.
Okay. So tell us, where is that race? Who is that? Who should we have on next? We can come and support you, but you're saying you're really advocating for others. What race should we be looking at in Nevada?
Well, what I would say, really, it's Nicole Canizero is her name. And I wouldn't say she's necessarily progressive, but the fact is she controls the destiny of me, because if she prevails over her Republican opponent, then Democrats control the state Senate, and I can do the things I need to do.
Nicole, what's her name? Last name again?
I apologize. It's Canizero, and I'd have to spell her name.
Yeah, we'll find it. We'll find it. It's close enough.
She's here in Las Vegas. It's an open seat for the state Senate, and the state Senate caucus itself is a very helpful way to help us, because that they help get the Democratic senators elected. But the fact is, just being what your audience, if they can just support Senator Sanders and the progressive movement, and whatever happens, don't get discouraged. That realize that this is Senator Sanders says, which is one of his best things. This is a movement.
Yeah.
He can't do anything by himself. I can't do anything by myself. And so it's the fact that there are people out there that we can all talk to together and work together collectively, raising money, walking, doing whatever it takes, and being vocal. I mean, when I came to the state Senate, I had ideas, and people said, "Oh, those are crazy ideas." The reality is, they're not crazy at all. I mean, once we push the conversation to the left, people were, those are normal. I mean, as he says, why wouldn't you have national health insurance, single payer? I mean, when people actually articulate that, then it becomes part of the conversation. But we need to have people saying those things.
Right, right. I have someone in my chat room who said, "Is this a politician talking straight?" I honestly, you're talking pretty straight. You've said some things tonight that I would not have expected a politician to say, and I think my audience appreciates that. I know I appreciate that. Listen, I'm going to let you get that phone because they're calling you twice. I thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to reach out to the other candidate that can actually help make a huge difference in Nevada, and we're going to get them on the air and put some progressive Army boots on the ground for them. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you,
ladies and gentlemen. That is Tick Segerblom. Segerblom. Let me get that correct. And he is running for re-election in the Nevada 3rd District State Senate. I had him on tonight because we're doing a series of interviews with progressive candidates across the nation, not just those running.